Let's move on to our first feature review. Well, he said he promised to be back, and here he is. Arnold Schwarzenegger returning to leading man status.
That was quick. That was quick to get that line in.
Well, yeah, I just want to get it out of the way, really.
Actually, yeah, now it's done. It's done. Yeah, good.
Look, The Last Stand it's a film that pretty much wants to be Rio Bravo. Have you ever seen that one, man?
No.
It's the old story of the sheriff in the small town, and the bad guys are coming, so he bands together some misfits to, defend the town. Basically, it's a pretty well-worn thing. In fact, I believe it was John Ford that did Rio Bravo, and he then went and remade that same basic plot 2 more times because he loved it so much. So it's definitely been done.
Cool.
Directed by
Kim Ji-woon,
who had directed A Tale of Two Sisters, which I loved, and a bunch of other films in his native Korea, I believe.
The Good, the Bad, the Weird is another popular one of his.
And this is his first Hollywood feature. And I can't help but wonder how this came about, whether the producers sat around watching a ghost story about these 2 Japanese schoolgirls and went, yes, that is the man to bring Arnold Schwarzenegger back into the action world.
It is a very, very curious choice. So basically, the whole premise of this film is that Arnold Schwarzenegger is playing an aging sheriff in a very, very small country town on the border of USA and Mexico. And none other but a huge drug cartel leader is about to come racing through, trying to cross the border. And who do you think will try and stop this man? Here's a clip.
Clarence, where's the fire coming from?
Behind you, roof next to the diner.
Cover me, guys.
Yes, sir.
How are you, Sheriff?
Old.
The thing that struck me most about this film is that this is a big thing. I was really looking forward to this. Arnold Schwarzenegger's finally coming back. He's been 10 years out of the game. Last film he was in was Terminator 3, I believe.
Last film he was the lead in, at
least. Yes. He's cameoed in The Expendables, and his likeness was used in Terminator 4 very briefly. So he's pretty much been gone. And you would expect a man of that stature to come back with a bang, and with a really, really big bang, putting aside the Expendable stuff. And he doesn't. This is a really small movie. It's regardless of its quality, which we'll get to, it is a very small comeback initially. And even his first shot is him driving up in a car, and he just gets out. Now, I really thought after the Expendable movies gave such money shots to the entrances of aging action stars that we were going to get some really triumphant return from the man, and it's very meek. It's very, very surprising. That was the thing that took me by surprise.
Yeah, I think the filmmakers were trying to be a bit serious with it, trying to do more of a character piece, because he's supposed to be the everyman at the start of the film, which Arnie plays so awfully in many films. He's always trying to be he's just a guy, and he gets put in a situation, and then he becomes the action hero, but you didn't see it coming unless you realized that it was him.
A lot of people level that criticism at Total Recall, the idea that they couldn't believe he was just a lowly construction worker.
Yes, and True Lies, like he's just an office drone. He's not a spy at all.
That's right.
Anyway, look, the film, it feels like 2 films to me. I don't know if you felt this, but
yes, yeah. I'm glad you say this.
It's like 2 halves of 2 completely different films pushed together. You've got the small town sheriff defending against the gangster that's coming to town, and that is one film. And the other film, Forrest Whitaker is the lead, and it's a story about the FBI, and they're chasing a guy, and it's a police procedural.
Yes.
It's a completely different movie.
Yes.
And at the end, they vaguely come together, the 2 story strands. But,
but not in a way that would ever have suggested that it was intentionally meant to be 2 different strands.
They're different tones and everything. It's very strange.
Yeah, it doesn't quite work. You get no sense of the comedy in the Forrest Whitaker half of the movie,
No.
and you do get it almost too much in the Arnold Schwarzenegger section of the movie. So it's funny because the comedy was fine. It was bearable to begin with. It actually, I'm not sure how you felt about it, but I thought that the movie actually started off fairly well. It had a brilliant set piece with the drug lord breaking out of jail. A great scene that involves a magnet.
That was that other movie.
And a car. Yes, that's the Forrest Whitaker section.
I like that movie.
Yes. Well, it's funny because Forrest Whitaker is terrible. I didn't think we'd get to him so soon in the review, but he is the most ineffective FBI agent you've ever seen. He exists solely to walk around and yell, and when he's told really vital pieces of information, he just poo-poos them and moves on. And
spends resources researching Arnold Schwarzenegger's character, which is a complete waste of time, where he should be trying to catch the bad guy.
Yeah.
Instead, he's like, who is this sheriff? Which
it's not really relevant. Don't worry about the sheriff. Worry about the drug lord you're trying to catch. Anyway,
a bit out of the blue, but what was the point of the clock? Did you notice that at the bottom of the screen there was the time? Every now and then it flashed up 5:07 a.m.
Like it's trying to give you a Goodfellas type
6:13
vibe.
a.m. I guess, but I guess they thought it was important. They thought it was amazing that the film took place over 4 or 5 hours. It was really annoying.
You know, the only thing I could think of to justify that is the fact that, and without trying to ruin any plot here, the movie is essentially a chase. This drug lord is making his way through with a really, really high-powered car, and there is some pretty decent sort of car porn type
There's
stunts.
a lot of car porn, yeah.
Yeah, which was actually, I did think that most of it was executed fairly well, but I think the idea is that for most of this, initially the FBI is trying to catch this drug lord, and they just can't do it. The guy's got a hostage in the car, and they can't do anything to the car particularly. They try, and
it's a supercar.
It is a supercar. They try, and the drug lord does super things with his supercar, and they can't catch him.
Yep.
Then there comes a time in the film where all of a sudden the FBI is, for all intents and purposes, just gone, and it seems like they've given up on trying to catch this guy, which seems really odd until you start to take notice of the times being shown at the bottom of the screen, showing that most of the last 45 minutes of this film is basically just an hour. And then it starts to make more sense because the exclusion of the FBI doesn't seem to be so glaring if you look at the time frame.
Okay.
So that would be my only excuse for it, but that exists just to cover up the fact that the FBI is so ineffective that they need an aging sheriff to one-handedly take this guy down. So.
Yeah. So it was like that they didn't really have enough faith in Arnie's bankability to really cash in on his action star status. He seemed to be almost underused. And they also spent a lot of time trying to get him to act, which I think was a mistake. Because, no one's going to accuse Arnie of being a great actor at any point in his career. But the fact is, he did the job that was required of him through those 80s action films.
Well, the thing that got him through that was his charisma. He has a hell of a screen presence.
Yes,
that
undeniably
overcomes, and this is the problem that the other action stars of the sort of Expendables ilk, if we can refer to them like that now, don't have. Like Dolph Lundgren doesn't have that sort of appeal. So and in my opinion, Sylvester Stallone doesn't either. I've never been a fan, particularly of the Rocky series. First Rambo I thought was great, but anyway,
Arnie is essentially peerless. He just is a freak of nature, because it's ludicrous that a man with an accent like that and a physique like that became the most American of all time. You know what I mean?
That's right. Yeah,
he is just a god in 80s cinema.
Yes.
And it's strange. No one can really explain it, but there it is, and no one really comes close. So yeah.
Yeah. So exactly. No one's gonna sue him over his acting abilities. That's for sure. But they don't give him the action pieces in this to warrant his inclusion in the film. Most of the really, really great action set pieces, and there are some actually really inventive action scenes. There's another good scene using night vision, which I thought was a little bit underplayed. They could have done a little bit more with it, but it was somewhat interesting.
Yes.
But for the most part, they give all the great action scenes to the other half
supporting
of the movie.
characters.
To the drug lord and him trying to outwit the FBI.
Yeah.
So it's weird because you would think that if you're gonna include Arnold Schwarzenegger in your movie, you're gonna try and get these money shots in. And there are times when he's wandering around with a shotgun, and you sort of get these flashbacks to what this guy used to do and how cool he used to be, and it just never really worked.
Yeah, I think they tried to show how badass he is with exposition. You know, there were scenes where people talked about how badass he used to be. This character that Arnie plays has the most cliched action backstory. He used to be a narcotics agent in LA when he was a young man. He took down all these bad guys, but then all the other cops he was working with got killed in an operation that went wrong. So he retired from the narcotics agency and he went to be a sleepy sheriff town.
And as the FBI, yeah, exactly. And as the FBI guy puts it, he got 5 bullets for his thanks or something like that.
It's really awful, and that's it. And he's supposed to go, okay, he's an action Superman, but yeah, you don't really see much of that.
Yeah, it's never established at all. You can't just have these people tell you.
Show don't tell.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and because you can't trust these people that are telling you anyway, because they're the minor characters in a film that you just that you don't care about these guys. What you really want to see is Arnold Schwarzenegger just getting his thing on and doing his thing, and that thing never got done.
Yeah, and look, that clip is a bit misleading because although that's a mildly humorous line where he talks about being old, thankfully the film is not filled with that. I was expecting it to be more of what's called now Jerry action, where it's just all the gags are based on how old the star is, and obviously Expendables are a lot like that. And I think Stallone's current film that he's got out, Bullet to the Head, is a lot like that. Even a bit of the new Die Hard film. Lots of quips and stuff about them being a bit past it.
That's right.
But apart from that gag there that you heard in the clip, thankfully they didn't really labour that point, which was nice. I expected it to be half the screenplay was jokes about Arnie being old, but it actually wasn't.
That was a relief.
Yeah.
And there were times when his interactions with other characters were sort of humorous. Johnny Knoxville of Jackass, there we go. Of Jackass fame, is second billed in this film. He is in it at the beginning and he's in it at the end. It was a very minimal use of him, which I was very surprised with initially because he's so highly billed. But ultimately, I think it was actually a really good decision because I went into this movie really excited. Probably the most excited I've been going into a screening for a long time, maybe even going back to The Dark Knight Rises, just because I'm a huge Arnie fan, and I know that this movie wasn't going to be great, but it was just going to be a pleasure to see him on screen again. And the only trepidation I had going in was knowing that Johnny Knoxville was in it, and that if him doing his shtick was going to overpower this movie, it would ruin it. So luckily, small doses of Johnny Knoxville are actually really effective. He's the classic cliched comedy relief, and I think it actually worked.
What did you think of the ultraviolence?
Surprising.
Yeah. It's interesting because the target audience of this film, I feel, is about like a 13, 14-year-old boy. Like, I don't think it's a very well put together film for an adult audience. I think it's very, very simple, and it's aimed at they're sort of aiming low.
Oh,
but the violence itself is really bloody and over the top and great. It reminded me of Total Recall because it was just so out there.
Yeah,
and I think that's where that violence lives. That's where it belongs, on the cinema screen, over the top and crazy, because that it's not in real life.
Well, look, it's an Arnold Schwarzenegger action movie, so yes,
it just really made me remember how fun those 80s films are because they're so over the top with the violence.
Yes.
And I think it's great, and I really enjoyed how ridiculous the violence was in this film. However, that violence pushed it up to a harder rating, but the rest of the film didn't get pushed up with it. You know what I mean? Like, it didn't strive to be a film that adults would enjoy en masse. It was definitely aimed at younger people.
Yeah, because
younger people couldn't see it.
That's right.
The rating.
Well, it's MA15 here, so you have to be at least 15 to be able to buy a ticket. Yeah, but I think that they're probably also aiming towards the guys that are probably in their late 30s now who grew up with that sort
the
of stuff.
Expendables crowd.
Yeah, but you're right because they are also going for that younger crowd because the movie is so riddled with cliche.
I assume it's R-rated in the States. I didn't look it up, but
yeah, I'm not
judging
sure.
by the blood on display, it must be an R-rated film in the States.
Yeah, you'd think so. I mean, there's actually a really great death with a gun from Johnny Knoxville, somewhat towards the end. That's really entertaining, and it's funny. This film did feel like at times it had me laughing along with it and having a great time, and then at other times I actually was just close to laughing at how bad it was. There's a line, I believe that you've got it in your notes. If you care to,
I don't know if this is
recite
verbatim,
it.
but this is when we're introduced to the villain character, the drug lord, and he's telling a story about about
badass he is.
about death and about how badass he is and how important it is to listen to what he's saying. And there's no irony in this speech at all. And he talks about. Well, he says death is waiting for you in the kitchen when you wake up in the middle of the night for a glass of milk. And this is supposed to be a really meaningful, like, get you in the gut somewhere. But it just sounds ridiculous.
Actually, I had to struggle to not laugh out loud.
Yeah, I think I did laugh out loud.
It was terrible. It's terrible.
I recoiled many times in this film. It was as many parts enjoyable as it was kind of excruciating for me. I really... No,
that's right. Yeah, it didn't. It when it worked, it worked. But just the rest of the stuff dragged it down. Whenever it tried to get into any sort of sense of emotion, it was terrible. Actually, any of that drama was just shocking.
Yeah. The tooling up sequence was pretty hilarious. There's a moment where all the characters have to arm themselves with weapons, and it's done to this rockin' soft rock soundtrack sort of inspirational music thing. It's really epically 80s. I did have a good time with some of those pastiches. I think the filmmakers were definitely trying to remind the audiences of how silly and fun those 80s action films were.
Yeah. Well, this director is I must confess, I have not seen his other films. I've had A Tale of Two Sisters on the top of my must-see list for a long, long time, and I just didn't get around to it this week.
It's terrifying, man.
Right.
It scared the hell out of me. I loved it.
Okay, cool. Well, hopefully I'll get around to it the next couple of days. But you do get the feeling that the director is talented, and obviously he has a reputation for making creative movies, incorporating action, but not solely just including action. So, yeah, it is weird. He definitely feels like either he got dumbed down by the American system, or he was just willing to go along with it. I think
there's not a lot of flair or style in this. It feels like many people could have made this film.
That's right.
The same way.
It wouldn't have mattered who made it, really. It could have been, it's one of those sort of machine-directed films where you just throw in your emotion, throw in your love interest, and throw in your action, and throw in a epic action sequence at the end. And the last sort of 20, 30 minutes is just so by the numbers, down to every single move. Climaxing in a showdown that's not unlike Gangster Squad, which I thought was terribly cliched.
I have to agree, and also that particular showdown is done with some awful CGI because they're in a location that is not a real location. You can tell that it's been made on a computer,
right? And
it's really distracting to the eye. At least I found. I just spent the whole time thinking this is like watching a cutscene from a computer game, which would be great if it was a computer game. Unfortunately, it's a cinema. It's a movie, it's happening, I'm watching it, I paid money for this, and it just looks bad.
That's true, yeah. There are also other times during the action scenes where they'd set something up for a great sort of... there's a scene where there's a snow driver that's about to plow through two cars, and it's getting its run up, and you think, this is going to look really cool, leads up, hits the cars, and then all of a sudden the camera cuts to 2 or 3 different shots, and all I could think of was that extra bonus scene in the special feature on the Dark Knight Blu-ray where they go into detail about how they flipped that semi-trailer in the middle of a city.
And they held the shot.
Yeah. And they said, and the reason for doing that was because if you see something like that happen in real life, you stand there and you stare at it until the entire thing is done. You don't try and run around to various places looking at it from different shots because then it takes away the realism. But it was just, they'd set up these really excellent action scenes and then just edit the hell out of them. And it was really disappointing because I wanted to see these things happen and you didn't.
Yeah, it was also shot with those digital cameras with the high frame rate as well, because the high shutter speed or whatever, because I noticed, especially in the action scenes that were edited that way, you could see that it looked like on-set footage, which is a shame. It takes you out of it. I'm really sick of this really bad use of digital photography, but there it is again.
Yeah.
Just like Gangster Squad.
Yes, that's true.
Did you like Peter Stormare?
What? Where was he from in this movie?
He was
I'm aware that he's Swedish.
I'll tell you, no. He's from Eurotrash villain land.
Not Eurotrash, Texas?
No.
Because I couldn't work out if he was meant to be Southern, or if he was meant to be... European.
He's Hans Gruber's long-lost cousin. Like,
Right.
He's from the same stock. They're just trying to do the exact same thing that Die Hard did with their Euro trash villain. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter where they're from. They're from somewhere foreign.
Yeah, okay. It's just that from the accent, I thought that it was actually somewhere
You
local.
actually thought he was trying to be
Well,
Southern?
I thought possibly. Their accent was all over the place.
It was... Yeah.
I love Peter Stormare. He's
He's-
a classic bad
I really
guy.
loved him in this. He was so much fun.
Really?
I loved his character. I did.
Okay.
Even when I was watching the film, I wasn't sure about it, man. I was watching the whole time going, what are you doing in this film? After looking back on it, I thought he was my favourite character. He was just chewing the scenery, loving
Right.
being evil, and it was fun.
Okay, that's fair enough. Harry Dean Stanton pops up for a cameo. That's very strange.
It's like he looks at the contract and says, is my part going to be longer than 4 minutes? Because if so, I don't want to do it.
I've got lunch at 12 o'clock.
He keeps on appearing in films like that, and then he's just gone again.
I
Anyway.
know. I guess it's a good way to make a living, but it's not doing
suppose.
anything to his resume. And
No.
you look back on things like Paris, Texas, and you go, God damn, that guy can lead a film.
He's getting on in years. He's served his time. He can do what he wants now. But
He
it is
suited
strange.
that character. It was just strange because, again, like we started off this review, this is a very small movie, so to cameo the way he did in a small movie, was a guy of such reputation, it just seems sort of weird.
I'm sure his paycheck wasn't small.
No, I don't think it was at all. So generally, all up, I think the most original and exciting bits were probably the credit sequences. They were done pretty well. they look pretty nice. It's funny because I don't harbour a hell of a lot of resentment towards this. I just think that it's sort of a missed opportunity. When you look back at Arnie's movies, he really you'd think that he's shrewd as a businessman.
Yes.
And from a point of view of managing his career, he really knows what he's doing. I'm just perplexed as to how he ended up involved in this movie and decided that this was the one that he should have used as his comeback. At its very best, it's a middling action movie, and at its very worst, it fumbles over characters and exposition and cliche and all of that. So it's just a shame, really.
Yeah.
I really wanted this to be something that I would wait for and be excited to get on Blu-ray and have a great time with again. But
Look,
no,
next
sir.
time he's obviously he's going to be putting out a lot more films in the coming years, so maybe he'll have a chance to redeem himself. But it was pretty average. I wouldn't really be recommending this.
No, I wouldn't either. He's coming up in 2014 in a film called 10, in which he has a radically different look, which looks really interesting. Still, typical badass type thing, but it looks more interesting than this sort of timid affair.
Yeah.